we were encouraged to question everything, to scrutinize whatever the teacher said, not to take it on just because the teacher said so, to be critical, to ask questions. I was very fortunate that in my class, we had a huge class. We started off, I think, with almost 50 monks, mainly monks. I craved some nuns, but unfortunately there weren't any. But anyway, so mainly monks, and many of them had studied already for many years. Some of my classmates had finished Pachin, but they came to Maklagon, had studied in Drepung. Others had come from Tibet, that studied at Tashilumpo. So they had already a really good background, which helped everyone else. Some came because of physical reasons, some sickness, because in the south, in Drepung, it's really hot. Others wanted to also learn English and wanted to learn more grammar and so forth. But they had to all start together with us from scratch. So that was good for us beginners. It's really good. But as I said, the most important part is the debate. So there's a particular structure to that. Basically, the way it is structured is that we had a class every day, sometimes, but very rarely more than one, an hour and a half, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And in class, you have a particular curriculum. You go through the text, that I mentioned earlier. And every time there's a certain passage, sometimes a page or two, sometimes just a verse, depending on how difficult it was, that was discussed in class. So when you think of the practice of listening, reflecting, and meditating, that was the first step. Listening, that is learning the Dharma. So we received some explanation, and already in class, we were encouraged to question everything, to scrutinize whatever the teacher said. So that kind of interchange was very much encouraged. But then we prepared for the debate. So how do you prepare for a debate? Well, first of all, you had to memorize the most important aspects. Now, whether it's colors, whether it is what exists and what doesn't exist, or bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, very important topic, one of the main topics that you start with when you study the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So, the mind of enlightenment. First of all, what is its definition? What are its main characteristics that distinguish it from other minds? What kind is it? A mind? Is it a mental factor? How many categories does it have? How is it developed? What does it mean you have developed that mind? How does it connect to other minds? How long do you keep it? Can you lose it, etc.? So you get a very thorough explanation, which of course it's limited how much you can cover in class. So then you read the commentaries. You read whatever you can find basically to give you more information. And you memorize. You need to memorize the definition, the categories that are given in your particular text. You can't take your book to the debate ground. So you read the commentaries, you memorize, you had class, and now you go to the debate ground. And especially when you study Bodhicitta, you've already debated for a few years, so it's much easier now to debate it. And now you have this exchange with another person. First of all, the motivation is extremely important. Of course, if you can, for the benefit of all sentient beings, but at least to help this other person, to help yourself to gain an understanding, to overcome wrong views, but also the other person you're debating with. And then you have that exchange in the sense that there are two roles, there are two things to do as a debater. Either you're the challenger or you're the defender. If you're the person challenging, well, you're basically asking the other person, and what you do is you set the stage first. It's not like you dive into a debate right away, but rather you, for instance, quote a particular, give a particular quote, like a quote that is well known or less known, that describes at least the topic you'd like to debate. And then you ask, where's this from? Where is this quote from? So the other person needs to have some understanding, so you're checking. And then ask them, what is the outline that it's part of? What are the other outlines that accompany it? So it's a bit like setting the stage, in the sense like the other person now has to show, have they memorized the text? Have they understood the division, the outlines, the definition, the divisions, and so forth. Now, it's really hard to give you an example of a debate, especially when we talk about Bodhichitta and so forth. That wouldn't work, because if you're not familiar with the kind of structure. So an example that is oftentimes given, it's a very simple example. It's the debate of the white horse. This is something you study in the very beginning as part of your first subjects, studying about colors, for instance. Now, first, of course, you talk about what is a color as opposed to a living being, as opposed to a shape, etc. So you categorize, you classify phenomena. And then you have a particular text or explanations by your teacher. And so what you're told is, for instance, a white horse. What is a white horse? Well, a white horse is an animal. It's a living being. And a living being is not a color. It's not a shape. It has a color. It has a shape. So that's pretty much, it's explained, right? So white horse has a color, has a shape, has a size, but it's a horse. Okay, so you have these categories of colors, white, blue, and so forth. You have primary colors, you have secondary colors. So whatever is white is a color, whatever is blue is a color, and so forth. And so now the debate starts. All this has been explained. That's the outline, that's the kind of basis. And now you start debating. So the challenger would now say, well, regarding the subject, a white horse, it follows that it's white. And usually we say, yeah, a white horse is white. We don't really think about it. The challenger says, regarding the subject, a white horse, it follows that it's white. And the defender says, I accept. That's when you get them. Right there. Now you can point out this inconsistency. So then, instead of saying the white horse is not white, this is also very unique to the debate, you don't tell them, no, the white horse is not white. You now use consequences. You use arguments in the form of absurdities that show the other person that their view is wrong. I have mentioned this earlier, but this is an important part of the debate, that you don't tell them you're wrong, but rather show them in an elaborate way, if you can, and less elaborate if it's not possible, that whatever they assert, that it leads to, that their assertion, their wrong assertion, leads to all sorts of absurdities. So going back to the white horse, regarding the subject, the white horse, the other person has said the white horse is white. Then you say to them, regarding the subject, the white horse, it follows it is not a horse. The other person goes, what? No, the reason is not established. Saying, of course, it's a horse. Regarding the subject, the white horse, it is not a horse because it's not an animal. No, the reason is not established. Again, the challenger says, regarding the subject, the white horse, it is not an animal because it's not a living being. Again, the reason is not established. Well, regarding the subject, the white horse, it follows that it's not an animal because it's a physical phenomenon. It's matter. The reason is not established. Well, it's a physical phenomenon because it's a color. The reason is not established. It's a physical phenomenon because it's white. And whatever is white is necessarily a color. That's what the defender definitely accepts. So you see, it may not be the best example because I didn't take you through all the pervasions and everything, but it's an example where that initial answer saying that the white horse is white led to the absurdity that therefore a white horse is not a horse. It's not an animal. It's not a living being. It can't be because it's a color. Yeah. So that's just one example. But then when you're good enough at doing this, then you can take any subject, any topic basically, Bodhichitta and so forth, and through this way of using absurdities, the person understands the consequences of their wrong view, that it doesn't make sense with regard to this and that and so forth. And it's much easier then to let go of their wrong view, because everything is connected. So if we get it wrong here, then that has consequences. It's like a ripple effect. Then nothing else, this doesn't make sense and that doesn't make sense. And all that is pointed out in the debate.